I ain't gonna be the one looking after the old lady. Same here. These shocking words from my husband and sister-in-law marked the start of our discussion at my in-laws. My brother-in-law and his wife and I froze in response. Why don't you and Sarah take care of her if you're so concerned? We don't need the burden of an old woman in our home. My sister-in-law spat those words at me and my brother-in-law, with my husband just staring at us without a hint of remorse. How could they cast aside their own parents who had raised and loved them so easily? I was flabbergasted, and for the first time in my life, I felt an intense anger. But my husband and sister-in-law were oblivious to a surprising truth about my mother-in-law. Sarah and her family will be taking care of me. Do you think $1 million will cover the car and my accessible living accommodations? What? We too were taken aback by this revelation about my mother-in-law. Simultaneously, my husband and sister-in-law were clueless that they had unwittingly dug their own grave. My name is Sarah. This year, I turn 40. Inspired by my parents, who were artists, I too pursued a career in art. Now I teach at a famous art school in New York. It's busy, but I love it because I get to work with American art. Through a family friend named Emily, I met and married her son Gavin when I was 26. We had our daughter Autumn the following year and our daughter Kate 3 years later. Now both my children are in middle school. I am living my passion for American art, inspired by my mother-in-law. I had hoped for a peaceful life with my family and my mother-in-law forever, but reality is not always kind. That harsh truth hit me when I received the news that my mother-in-law had suffered a stroke. She was a kind soul who loved me like her own daughter, having known me since I was a child through her friendship with my parents. But after my father-in-law, Ryder, passed away 3 years ago, she seemed to lose her spirit. I noticed this change and often visited her with my kids, spending time with her and even going on outings together. Slowly, she seemed to regain her spirit. However, one day, I was taken aback when my children called to say she had collapsed. I rushed to the hospital after explaining the situation to my boss at the art school. Upon arriving, I saw my husband, sister-in-law, and my kids having a heated discussion. "Dad, Aunt, why would you say something like that? Grandma is your real mom, right?" "Yeah, you need to think about Grandma's feelings too, not just Mom's." "Shut up. You kids have no business in this. Keep your mouths shut." Seeing my husband shouting at our children in the hospital and my sister-in-law glaring at them, seeing that they were not calm, I rushed over to them and interrupted their conversation. "What's going on here? Calm down. Can someone explain to me what happened?" Struggling for breath as I tried to soothe my bickering husband and children, my husband and sister-in-law both let out exasperated sighs, wearing annoyed expressions. "You're slow, Sarah. Deal with these kids, will you? They've been going on and on about wanting to see their grandmother, and it's getting on our nerves. We have to be somewhere, so handle the rest, okay?" Just like that, they dumped the situation on me and left the scene. My husband often treats our kids and me differently. He doesn't seem to care about us. This happens all the time. And while he has a part-time job that keeps him busy 4 days a week, it's not like he's bringing in a lot of money. Worse yet, all that he earns, he spends on himself. Furthermore, including his part-time work, he's always out and about from morning till night. On the rare occasions that he's home, he's always fiddling with his phone or buried in a comic book. I've repeatedly asked him to help with the household chores and spend some quality time with our kids. However, he just ignores me or lashes out with harsh words, much like he did with our daughter earlier. After getting married and having children, thanks to the generosity of my parents-in-law's friends, I never thought our life would turn out this way. It makes me wonder if I should have given my marriage more thought when choosing a life partner. As for my sister-in-law, she behaves just like my husband, indifferent towards me, our kids, and even mother-in-law. And it's not just mother-in-law. She was the same way with my father-in-law when he was alive. If she's interested in anything, it's her job as a hostess where she gets to entertain young men. Therefore, she does absolutely nothing in terms of household chores or caring for mother-in-law at our shared home. Whenever mother-in-law tries to tell her something, she snaps back. Geez, be quiet. Unlike you, I don't have that much free time. Being a hostess is a decent job for me, and it's what keeps me going. With a grimace on her face, she vehemently rebuffs mother-in-law and hardly ever takes her seriously. The saying, parents' hearts are unknown to their children, could not ring truer in this situation, or rather, it's worse than that. At the sight of such atrocious behavior from their daughter and son, I was at a loss for words. Nevertheless, with mother-in-law currently undergoing surgery, my main concern was for her well-being. I continued to pray that the surgery would go smoothly. Amidst all of this, a certain someone arrived at the hospital, someone I had called on our way here. Sister-in-law, how is Mom? How is Mom doing? It was Shane, the younger brother of my husband and sister-in-law, his wife Mia, who is 2 years younger than him, and their twin daughters, who are the same age as my children. The brother-in-law's family had rushed here for mother-in-law and were panting and drenched in sweat. Brother-in-law became a novelist after one of the novels he wrote as a hobby during his university days got published online and became a huge hit. After graduating from university, he became a novelist, got married 2 years later, and had twin daughters. Now, due to work, he has moved out of his parents' house and lives peacefully with his family of 4 in an apartment in the city. Well, she's still in surgery. It's uncertain what will happen. I see. There was nothing else I could say to reassure them. However, in the face of such vague, comforting words, the brother-in-law looked slightly relieved. Unlike his older brother and sister, brother-in-law genuinely cares for us and mother-in-law. Just like me, he was worried about mother-in-law, who had aged and become a widow. Therefore, he kept in touch with mother-in-law, brought his family back to his parents' house several times to check on her, which also served as a source of comfort and strength for mother-in-law. My in-laws were genuinely kind souls, and had always avoided saying anything more than necessary to my husband, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, since they were children. I suspect that this, unfortunately, resulted in my husband and sister-in-law becoming the way they are. The only consolation is that brother-in-law grew into a decent human being. A few hours later, the surgery was over and the doctor called us into a tiny room. We've done all we could. She'll survive, but there will be lingering effects. She's going to need round-the-clock care from here on out, he told us, leaving me and brother-in-law's family breathless. It would be wonderful if mother-in-law could be healthy again. Not caring for her would inevitably mean dealing with my husband and sister-in-law more often than I'd like. Despite our reluctance, brother-in-law and I decided to call my husband and sister-in-law. They seemed bothered by the situation, but after a thorough explanation and persuasion from us, they finally agreed to talk about it. We had a meeting at my in-laws' house while mother-in-law was still hospitalized, and both my husband and sister-in-law attended. As soon as we started the meeting, my husband and sister-in-law began complaining, saying they weren't interested in caring for mother-in-law. I ain't taking care of that old hag. Same here. What? At those appalling words from my husband, both me and my brother-in-law's family froze. Brother, sister, don't joke at a time like this. If you won't look after her, what's going to happen to Mom? Why should we care? You and Sarah can take care of her, she dismissively uttered, fiddling with her beautifully manicured nails. My husband, too, gave a nod, an expression of boredom etched on his face. Then we should consider placing mother-in-law in a nursing home. What nonsense. You're suggesting we use our money for that old woman? A nursing home? Are you kidding? That's just throwing money down the drain. At my husband and sister-in-law's outrageous remarks, my brother-in-law finally erupted. So you're seriously abandoning Mom? Not willing to care for her or even put her in a facility? Shane, you're being annoying. If you're so concerned, why don't you and Sarah take care of her? We don't need a senile poor creature around. With a deeply exasperated expression, my sister-in-law spat out these words. My husband, too, was showing signs of frustration. At this point, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Hold on. What's the meaning of this? She's your mother, and Gavin's and Shane's, right? As if we care. Just because she's our mom, why do you assume we have to take care of her? Shane is her son too, so you and Shane can take care of her. Sarah, you don't have formal qualifications, but you've been caring for Mom almost every day, right? So looking after her should be a piece of cake for you, right? With that, my sister-in-law smirked in the most disgusting way, and I no longer had the energy to argue. The situation was the same for my brother-in-law's family. We decided to bring this issue up with mother-in-law first, then we left their home. As we were leaving, my husband smirked unpleasantly and said he wouldn't be coming home until this issue was settled. That they would so easily abandon their own mother who had raised and loved them. I was in disbelief, and for the first time in my life, I felt a deep anger. Days later, with heavy hearts, my brother-in-law's family and I visited the hospital where mother-in-law was admitted. When we entered mother-in-law's hospital room, she was in better spirits and greeted us with a smile. "Oh, Sarah and Shane, I'm sorry for being a bother." Every time we visited, mother-in-law would say something like this. "Mom, don't say such things. Look, we've brought your favorite grapes and pears. If there's anything else you'd like to eat, just tell us and we'll get it for you." Mother-in-law's condition had improved since she was first admitted, but as a side effect mentioned by the doctor, she had become paralyzed on her right side. As a result of her condition, she needed help from the nurses to eat, which had become quite difficult. Facing mother-in-law in this condition, my brother-in-law's family and I were hesitant, but we made up our minds to discuss our meeting with my husband and sister-in-law and propose living together at home. Really? I can't believe Olivia and Gavin would do such a thing to me. Saying this, my mother-in-law looked downcast, and that's when it hit me. She must have sensed somewhere deep down that she wouldn't be able to return to her own home anymore. In spite of it being my mother-in-law's house, my sister-in-law and her husband were living there. The bitter irony was, knowing her character, they would probably treat mother-in-law like a nuisance when she returned, likely forcing her into some kind of care facility. As I wallowed in my frustration, mother-in-law suddenly made a surprising request. "Sarah, could you please grab the banking card from the drawer of that desk over there?" With a serious look on her face, mother-in-law pointed to the drawer of the desk just next to her hospital bed. Inside that drawer were the valuable items, including the banking card, that I'd previously brought her from her house when I'd visited her in the hospital. I wondered what she could possibly need a banking card for, but fetched it nonetheless. Once in mother-in-law's hands, she opened it, revealing it to me and my brother-in-law and his wife. "I've got savings here. Could you and Shane make use of it?" Brother-in-law and I were flabbergasted at the sight of the banking card. It showed a balance the likes of which we had never seen before. In that moment, I became certain that I could show my husband and sister-in-law something they didn't expect. A few days later, brother-in-law and I called our spouses, asking them to come for an important meeting. The meeting would be at mother-in-law's hospital. My husband and sister-in-law showed their disdain when they heard about the venue, but bit when we added that mother-in-law had important matters to discuss regarding her future. They probably assumed she had decided to move into a facility and surrender the house and, of course, the money. The following day, my husband and sister-in-law showed up at mother-in-law's hospital room. Upon seeing mother-in-law, myself, our children, brother-in-law, and his family all gathered there, their faces turned sour. "Why are all of you here?" "Mom, we just want to clarify, what exactly do you plan to do?" Their questions hung in the air, and mother-in-law, her face serious, responded, "I allowed Sarah and Shane to tell you. I have crucial matters to discuss about our future. That's why I asked everyone to gather here." My husband and sister-in-law looked at each other, both with puzzled expressions. Then mother-in-law, taking a deep breath, addressed them. As per your wishes, I will move out once I am discharged. I will no longer show up in front of you or interfere with your lives ever again. What? My husband and sister-in-law stared at mother-in-law, their faces akin to deer caught in the headlights. Sarah and Shane have filled me in on everything. The conversation you had about me in my house, the way you called me a terrible burden and planned to cast me out. I know it all. What the… Sarah, you… Way to spill the beans, Shane. You two hold on, the conversation isn't over yet. My husband and sister-in-law shot me and brother-in-law a furious glare. However, a stern rebuke from mother-in-law quickly turned their attention back to her. In exchange for my departure and our final goodbye, I'm asking both of you to leave the house as well. Naturally, I will be cutting ties and excluding you from any inheritance. What? The surprise on my husband and sister-in-law's faces was undeniable. From now on, I will be in Sarah's care. As I mentioned before, would 1 million suffice to make the house accessible and purchase a new car? What? Upon my mother-in-law's insistence, I pulled out the banking card I had tucked away in my pocket and presented it to my husband and sister-in-law. As expected, both of them were taken aback by the balance on the card. 1 million? How? What's happening? It's impossible. How does our mother, an elderly woman with no job, have this much money? It's your father's legacy, money he'd been saving all this time, okay? What? While my husband and sister-in-law looked even more confused, my mother-in-law started repeating the story she had shared with us a few days ago. According to her, my father-in-law was actually a wealthy man. When he passed away 2 years ago, she inherited his fortune of $1 million. My husband, sister-in-law, and even brother-in-law had been kept in the dark. The reason? Their father wanted to avoid gold diggers and thus had not disclosed his wealth to anyone other than my mother-in-law. Before his death, he expressed his wish for his children to use the money when they need it and entrusted all of his assets to my mother-in-law. Knowing this truth, my husband and sister-in-law were speechless, just like we were that day. Then my mother-in-law concluded, I was planning to split this money between you two, but after understanding your true feelings, I've changed my mind. Olivia, Gavin, you are no longer my children. I want you to leave this house. My husband and sister-in-law were jolted back to reality by her cold dismissal. What? What are you saying? Gavin and I are your legitimate children too. The only child I have is Shane. Plus, I have kind daughters-in-law, Mia and Sarah. You don't know them. Start packing your belongings now, sever your ties with Shane and Sarah, and leave. Having only ever known my mother-in-law's kind voice, I was astounded to hear this harsh tone. It seemed impossible that both could come from the same person. Looking at her, she had a very strong, aggressive look in her eyes, one that wouldn't allow any objections from my husband or sister-in-law. I was so stunned that I couldn't speak, but I quickly collected myself and pulled out my idea card, putting it next to the bank card. So here's the thing, Gavin. I'm taking this to City Hall right after, I declared. What? Are you serious? Gavin's eyes widened in shock as he saw the idea card I was brandishing. This goes to show how much you must despise me, right? Don't worry about Autumn or Kate. I'll take care of them. You just go live your life the way you want to. What I was holding was a divorce application. In a fit of rage during a previous argument about his lack of help around the house, my husband had filled it out and thrown it at me. Initially, I thought to discard it, but decided to keep it tucked away just in case our life together became untenable. At the moment of my pronouncement, my husband started trembling, erupting in a loud outburst. His sister-in-law, followed suit, yelling and lunging at my mother-in-law. Thankfully, my brother-in-law and his wife managed to restrain the two of them, and they explained the situation to the nurses who had rushed over when they heard the commotion. Security was soon called. A few minutes later, the security officers arrived, subdued my husband and sister-in-law, and escorted them out of the building while they screamed incomprehensible protests. Afterwards, with the help of a lawyer arranged by my mother-in-law, I divorced my husband. I not only received a financial settlement from the divorce, but also custody of our daughters. My mother-in-law made arrangements through her lawyer so that her last will and testament left everything to my brother-in-law, ensuring her estranged son and daughter wouldn't inherit a thing. The family home was sold off by my mother-in-law, and my ex-husband and his sister were forced to move into a shabby apartment. They both took on part-time jobs, working long hours every day. Yet they still found time to blame each other for their predicament and bicker constantly, much to the annoyance of their landlord and neighbors. As for me, I had my mother-in-law move into my home after she was discharged from the hospital, as per her wishes. Together with my kids, we took care of her. It was no easy task, but since I was already used to helping her out, it wasn't burdensome. We maintained a good relationship and went about our day-to-day lives in peace.